I have an interesting question I'm going to use that someone posed to me recently, except I will admit, for the sake of the person who posed the question, that I have no doubt that I'm about to expand, if not explode it beyond what they probably originally intended. But, be that as it may or April, the question had to do with this. Very close to actually what they asked, but they had a specific example in mind which I see no need to specify in the way in which I'm going to respond to it. But the question had to do with more or less this, that when they tried to do something, or when they did do something that I had described, that it seemed to take them away from where they were. And then the question was, how can I do it, which they will assume found favor with, attempting to do something I had described, an internal something. How can I do it and yet stay where I am? Now, this is so logical. This is so reasonable as to be almost unreachable, almost unimpeachable. It is wired into the system, to everybody, to believe that if they have the possibility of some new information, some kind of new internal experience, they might call it, if they were ordinary people, they might call it intellectual, they might even want to call it emotional, they might want to call it spiritual. You people, you should be able, of course, to just refer to it as nervous system, or intellectual experience. That the feeling is that if I'm going to really get the full use out of this new information, I can have a new experience, that I should be what I am now, so that I can actually extract all the possible use, potency out of it. Does everybody follow this now? Because this is not really what the person was asking. And it would seem on the surface that it would even be a reasonable question that I might try and rhetorically suggest in a roundabout way to some people under certain conditions. That is, if I am going to try to do something that's been described in this, and I do it, and by God, it is a little out of the ordinary, that it does do something to me internally, intellectually, that's not ordinary. But then it seems to be that, all right, I was so unordinary at the time that I feel as though something's amiss. That is, I should be able to do this, I should be able to stay more or less where I am, internally, and then do this, because it'd only be in that way that I can fully consider it, ponder it, try to squeeze it out, put it in my own mental blender. It sounds right. Not only is that apparently so logical as to fit what I suggested to you, that is, of being almost unreachable. That is, it's almost impossible to say, to even hint that it might be otherwise. Because if it's going to be otherwise, then some ordinary intelligence, listen fast because I'm just going to do this one fast. Ordinary intelligence, some people's ordinary intelligence could be wired in such a way as to say, well, now wait a minute. If it could be otherwise, that'd be getting too dangerously close to such things as drug-related experiences or induced experience. That is, that it's something artificial. That, yeah, I can take some sorts of peyote, mushrooms, or some kind of chemicals, and I've done it before this, and by God, I did have some kind of fresh insights into the universe, except it made me so un-me. It took me so far outside of my own, the perimeters, the basis of my own personality, that whatever it was I did see was lost. And some people's ordinary intelligence that have been around this long enough might even say that, you know, you've said that same kind of stuff. It's obvious as hell. Right. That's why it's so subtle. Because there is other trickery involved. Now, for ordinary people, one little quick thing, for you people who might be getting this on tape at some other time and some other place. May I assure you that it doesn't make any difference whether you take drugs or not, but if you're attempting to do this, it's a waste of time. And if you're attempting to do this, the day comes that it is of some consequence, whether drugs just be alcohol or some other things. Ordinary people, it doesn't matter. But even when you are involved with this, there is a kind of trickery that is so subtle that your own system is wired up to want to say, more or less, that I should be able to be where I am and get this new stuff and have time to sit down. That is, I don't want to be deranged. I don't want to be driven by some kind of extrinsic, ephemeral chemicals. But I want to be able to actually extract all the possible nourishment from this, and the only way I can do it is to be more or less me, and then be able to do this and sort of have time to sit down and unwrap it and look at it and ponder it, think about it, study it. That I cannot be off on some sort of, artificial induced, unusual state. A kind of trickery involved, not with ordinary people, because ordinary people, even if they could ask that sort of question, the answer would be the ordinary answer. That is, I should not be doing this if I was going to, that is, taking the drugs. If peyote, for instance, would give me new insight, then the only way to actually use it correctly would be able to take it and actually not be affected by it, other than to be affected by it and to take out what I could use, right? And if some ordinary person could ever come up with that, God knows why they would, but if they did and they insisted I answer, I'd go. But for you people, somebody attempting to do this, there is another kind of trickery involved that I almost said almost belies, almost denies, almost escapes verbalization. But I'm not going to say that. I'm just going ahead and even give it a shot. There is a kind of subtle trickery involved that's not necessary for any sort of ordinary mentation. And it's beyond the question that some of you have already sort of smiled at, that you realize there is a flaw in there somewhere, that if you take it beyond the three-dimensional level, that something is amiss. That is to say that I want this new information, or this new, call it info/experience, but I don't want to be carried away from what I am, because in some way I'm sure I'm missing something. I need to be where I am, and then have this new book, or have it open at a new page, be something really exciting, but I need to be where I am so that this excitement reaches its full pitch, that I am in the position to get the most out of it. The subtleness that belies almost three-dimensional description is that in certain areas, by actually pursuing what seems to be at first a method, it can actually take you away to the place itself. And what is outside the expected realms, what is outside the ordinary structures of three-dimensional reality, is a place that you could say that almost the method and the aim merge. The method and the intent. It sounds, I guess, a little strange, if not irrational. It is absolutely unknown through ordinary experience. Although I can describe it, and you can say, if you're ordinary, that sounds irrational, but I hear what you're saying. I can even give you an example of how irrational, if we were going to put it into material terms. I'm sure I can. Let's see. I can normally think at least a split second faster than I can talk. All right, here it goes. How about this? You whip out your trusty map. You look down and realize, I have never been to Paterson, New Jersey. And you look, and as you sort of plan, or as you look down and say, well, I'd have to take Interstate 85, and I'd have to go over, and you're maybe simultaneously trying to plot the driving time. You're looking around other possible cities that you might be either passing through or close by that you've never seen. It would be almost as though you could sit there and look at that and do some amount of planning and thinking and actually experience Paterson, New Jersey. That the intent, the method, or if that's a little too strange, maybe you go out and actually get in your car and stick the key in the ignition and maybe lay the map down and look at it. Find your own shadings, and then maybe that would be the same. All right, maybe you turn the engine on even. Maybe you turn the radio, get it to a nice station. Open the window, get the air conditioning just right, the heat just right. It is almost a merger of the method, the intent, that which you tried, and the aim of it itself. Now, if you, in some way, listening to ordinary conversation within yourself, that either sounds too weird or perhaps doesn't sound weird enough, in both cases, you missed it. Such a merger in the 3D world is ordinarily inappropriate, ordinarily not possible. The two must be separate. There would be no growth in life. There would be no activity. People would not be moving. Energy would not be flowing if in some way intent could actually merge with the aim. They have got to be removed. And if I continued three-dimensional descriptions enough, if some of you haven't already jumped ahead or off to the side on your own, in fact, the aim of something, the intent and the method, the process, that is even the desire to do it, have got to stay so far removed that if they do get too close, it almost acts like matter and antimatter. That is, what you were attempting to do, the interest you have, disappears. That is, if you actually could merge the desire, the intent to go to Patterson with going to Patterson, you'd have no interest in going to Patterson. You wouldn't become hostile, but you might, let's say that you did have to get in the car and crank it up and drive out your driveway, if you can follow this. And it took that far that it suddenly merged with actually being in Patterson. You would no longer go to Patterson. If somebody was with you, somebody would finally say, well, this is not the way to Patterson we planned. You'd go, you'd say, well, did you change your mind? Yeah, I guess I did. It would cease to be a piece of energy. It would cease to have any significance to you. All right? I can make it even more simplistic. How about this? When you get through eating, when you get full, you stop eating, right? If you decide that you wanted to get wet and you got in the shower nude and you said, I just want to get wet, assuming you're reasonable, within just a few seconds, wouldn't you turn off the shower if that was the intent? I can make it more simplistic. If you're going to run a race, 100-yard dash, and you pass the finish line, who's going to keep running? That is what it amounts to when I say that under 3D ordinary conditions, it is inappropriate. It's impossible for intent or for method to actually merge with the aim. And yet, when you can begin to push internal activities, intellectual activities beyond the 3D old building sites, there is a way in which the subtle operation, I call it a trick, but it's actually a new process, that the intent almost begins to merge with what you intended to do. And therefore the question of how can I do something new, how can I have new information / experience, and yet not actually be in some new place. I can actually be me and get the most out of it, which, I repeat again, almost sounds correct. In the 3D world, it is correct. It's as correct as it is incorrect. But the subtle aspect of it is, if you're doing something that is not in the ordinary scheme of things, if you're attempting to think continually when you do not have to think, you can begin to think things that what you think does not produce results. The new thinking is the result. That if you suddenly turned on yourself to play all of my old stories of men looking in the mirror, talking to themselves, and one guy's brain talking to his own brain, if your own brain said, I know you've been over, I haven't seen you in a while, and you get awfully quiet over there in that other section, I am just strongly of the opinion that you're off doing something I don't know about. And if that other part of the brain went, well, and it said, I want to know what it is that you're up to. You're close to all the kinds of admonitions and jokes of people talk too much if they're attempting to do this. Because there is nothing to be said about that. Not because the human language is so poor, not because there is some sort of spiritual limitations on the expressions of some sorts of esoteric knowledge and feelings. It is when you are thinking in a new area, there is not that same kind of distinction. There is not the same kind of counterpoint between what would seem to be your intention, that is, I'm going to think when I don't have to. And the old part of the brain says, I thought something like that was going on. What is it when you do that? What is it that you see and think? And if the new brain had been dumb enough to get in this conversation, that's when it stops. Because it would suddenly have to realize that there is no point to this. You're asking me, what is it that I think now that I think in a new place that it can't even touch? It wants to know, all right, what's the results of it? What's the payoff? The payoff is doing it. See? It would not compute. Would it? And you don't have to play just me talking about somebody's, one person's brain talking to itself. Would any reasonable person on this planet undertake anything, any course of study, attempt to involve themselves in any sort of discipline? Would anybody attempt to do anything when they said, all right, I like the sound of this, or I think I do, or I just imagine I do, and so I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Here's my fee, here's my money, here's my time. What's the payoff? And nobody can tell you, or nobody won't, or maybe somebody really weakens that has a big heart in the ordinary sense and says, God, I'd like to, but Jesus, I don't know what to tell you. What I want to do is kind of punch you on the shoulder and say, stiff upper lip, stick in there, come on. And the person says, all right, I'm almost that close, but just tell me, what is the payoff? The payoff is doing it. Who would do that? Who would go and sign up for a course and you thought you'd stumbled into one of these things of how to make $1 million in real estate? Let's say, well, I'm just trying to think up another simplistic example. Of course, the more simplistic they are, the more they are tortured. And so you pay your fee, or you're prepared to, and you say, all right, now, I was outside, I thought I heard some of this. Now, this course is guaranteed, right, that when I take the course, I'll know how to make a fortune in real estate. And the closest the guy can tell you is, well, no. Now, you may have heard some pieces that sound like that. I'm not saying that you're incorrect thinking you heard that outside the door. But the only guarantee is that if you take the course, you will have taken the course. No. Now, I want to know, now, maybe you misunderstood me, sir. I'm here, and I'm prepared to take the course. I heard something about it that goes on for an infinite number of weeks, or unspecified. Yeah, you got that right. But now, am I not correct? The payoff is, if I take the course, I'll be able to die. And the guy would have to say, if he was that wasteful of his time, he would say, nah, cut it right where you went, die. And then ordinary intelligence would have to say, well, wait a minute. All you're saying is, if I take the course, I will have taken the course. The intent, in a real sense, merges with what, in the 3D world, what would be the aim. That there is no difference. If any of you get a glimpse of that, then you can see why sometimes I play around with it, and you run across all sorts of backward history recordings, historical recordings of people here and there trying to say, well, there's things people can think about, or guys have said, there's things I thought about one time, and they were so astounding. They were so outside the pale of ordinary knowledge that, my goodness, I can't tell you what they are. And that attracts many people. A little mystery. A little cerebral shenanigans. But there is a real reason. Now, what if the payoff cannot be described as separate from the attempt? What if the destination in no way can be reasonably limed apart from the travel? that just attempting to travel or actually undertaking travel is the same as being there, well, of course, don't tell the guy that. He'll never sign up for the course. You mean just, I might come in and just sign up for the course and that'd be it? You mean I might even have to show up? You know, what if you just sort of hinted that, well, that's been known to happen. That I might just come in and just pay my money and I never have to show up, that suddenly I'll do that and whatever the payoff would have been, I'll have it. It's not unknown. Well, how about this? What if I just decide, all right, I will sign up for the course, and even before I give you my check, what if it happens? I can't say that's impossible. Well, what if I'm just sitting here and I don't even put my checkbook, I just think, I could dig it, I could do that. What if that's it? I can't tell you that's not it. I'm not telling you it is, because of course that's insane. Anytime you can divide the intent from the aim, from the payoff, which you can, of course, in all ordinary conditions, you are not dealing with new knowledge, with new info. You are not dealing with this. You're not dealing inside yourself. Forget this about it being outside of you and it being me and these tapes. You're not doing it. When there's a payoff. Well, one thing I like about doing this, it has given me, I think, a certain amount of more self-discipline. I'm not saying that in some way, from some observation, that even you people involved with this just a little while may not feel as though you're better off. That you may have quit drinking or smoking or eating so much, or you may be getting more exercise. You may simply feel better and you don't know why. That may be well and good. But that's not the payoff. And the more that you would allow yourself to even talk about that, and it's not going to kill you, so don't worry about it. It's not going to stop you. But the more you're involved with talking about such things as that of, yes, I'm really glad I did this, if for no other reason because I've lost weight. The more you talk about that, the less losing weight is going to have any effect on you. In fact, if in some way you were overweight from eating and lack of exercise, the more you talk about it, in case you're interested, the greater is the possibility of what? You becoming Professor Yo-Yo. There is a corollary in my area of funny physics that could be opportunely brought, up with which it could be opportunely brought this evening, suggest I. And that is that there is no such thing as wrong information. There is no such thing as wrong information any more than there could be impotent energy. It's not possible. There is this. Well, I'll give you the two stages. I'll get to real quick, the easy one. There's incomplete information, not wrong information. You got that? All right, now strike that. There's the incomplete comprehension of the information. Example. Look at history. Good night. Well, it suddenly struck me that covered it. I'd bore you with details. Just look at history. There it is. All right, here we go. Let me suggest also within my area of funny physics, there is an unrecognized situation in the transfer of energy, which is a transfer of information, which is a transfer of energy, and that is that this information is being transmitted continually on two levels. All information. Of course, we're speaking of humans now on the planet Earth. This information And the two levels could be referred to as the leading information and the sub-information, like a sub-carrier. But there is the leading, and that is all that people recognize. And that is where people believe that there is such an animal possible as wrong information, when there's not. Example, instead of just history, I can be a little more specific. A man states that 2 and 2 is 5. Now, the leading information is wrong. And I started out this paragraph saying there is no such thing as wrong information. So here we are. 2 and 2 is 5, states he. The leading information is wrong. But there is no such thing as wrong information. There is incomplete information. That is the incomplete perception of the hearer, of somebody, of the information. Because at the sub-level, as I'm calling it, there is correct information being conveyed. The correct information is that this man cannot add. Among other ways I could describe it, that the man is mathematically illiterate. But let's just say the man cannot add. So you can say that at the leading level, or at one level, but I made up names for 2 levels for a specific reason to help you map it out yourself to pursue some of this. At the leading level, that is the 3-dimensional ordinary level, then of course my original statement was incorrect, that there is such thing as wrong information. 2 and 2 is 5, he says. All right? That's wrong information, right? It's incomplete information. You can say that a piece of the information is incomplete, but that's not all that the man is informing you of. He's also informing you of the fact, hey, I can't add. Does that seem too simple? Let's go as far as ordinary intelligence probably would take it to be removed from the dull, jejune area of mathematics. How about into the great world of spirit and hocus pocus and guides and all that? How about this? Somebody says, somebody that seems reasonable, somebody with some sort of fame, somebody with some renown says, God talks to me. And let us say that you can think in such a way, that you're plugged in such a way that you know exactly the basis of men believing that, of men being driven to think and to say that. And let's assume, without me going into any great details about the chemical and electrical wiring involved, that you know exactly what is happening inside of his skull, inside of his nervous system, that he says, God talks to me. And that is as real, as history has proven many times, that the man might be able to be held down, somebody put hot coals in his pocket, or make him listen to Vic Damone records or something. They might torture the man, and he might die, claiming, I'm sorry, God talks to me. So in other words, at the 3D level, at the leading level of information, what the man says has got to be correct. He will die for it. Now remember, I threw in that by every other definition, he is sane, reasonable. But he fits every definition except he says God talks to him. It's not that that's wrong. It's incomplete. He doesn't understand it. The sub-information he's conveying to you is I don't understand what I'm saying. I said look at history. I can make up examples forever if you can't see them. If that was a little too right on the money, how about people that believe that some Bible they own, their culture with a small b, the Bible, the Old Testament, the Quran, or whatever, that somebody, large groups, it's not just somebody now, one person that you might try and identify as being a closet fanatic. There are millions of people that believe, for instance, that the Old and New Testament, or parts thereof, or one or the other, is literally the Word of God. The force outside the system that created this, that this is actually what the guy said. And there's no debating it. And we're not talking about just one guy standing out that appears to be a half-grown elm tree in a field with a Bible tucked under his arm. We're talking about millions of people that say yes, there is no doubt. That is literally what God said. And let's assume that it's possible to know how life is wired up, that there's another piece of information. That if whole segments of life's body tells you that, or if one person tells you that, it's not that that's wrong. Of course not. Surely some of you are following this. All right, I'm going to tell you this. Whatever's in that book is not the Word of God. And I'm not defining God for those people. It is not the Word of their God. All right? But it still doesn't make that wrong. It is not wrong for those people to say that what is written right here is the Word of God. The Word of the cosmic creators of all of us. It's not that that's wrong. It's just incomplete. The rest of the information is, I believe that this is the absolute words that came from our Creator, and plus I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. On a more complex level than what they just said. That's not a cheap shot at them, but I did it to try and drag you through the little doorway there in case you thought you were still hanging around. They are literally saying that, but it's not just religion. I picked that out as being an extreme example, I thought, removed from mathematics. Whatever people say, there is always a sub-message. It's like that there is the primary carrier, in the same way that they can piggyback. I assume some of you know that they can send out, in the electromagnetic spectrum, they can send out at the certain frequencies television pictures and the sound, and they can piggyback it and stick on these closed captions. They can stick on something else, and that you do not necessarily pick it up unless you have the right kind of receptor for it. Information, continually, as it is being adjudicated by ordinary people, that is what life needs them to take information as being, it is constantly on a basis that the information is flowing, it's being fed back for life's own purposes. Certain information taken by certain people, when they hear it, is judged to be correct. Sometimes it's sent back by, no, that is not true, that is wrong information. Now, everybody knows that. That is why I said look at history. What is history? If you want to be nicer instead of us saying, well, the history of man's a damn fist fight. We can say that. But if we're going to be a little more genteel and magnanimous about it, say, well, the history of man has been a hot debate, to say the least. That is, it's a whole bunch of, and if that is too esoteric, then look inside of your own brain. Your own brain, the history of your own brain is, all right? But that, for the purposes of doing this, is totally insufficient. Because, of course, what I'm inferring with some of this is one hand, one brain, one voice continues saying, that's wrong. You're wrong. What you're saying is wrong. And remember how I started this paragraph. On the basis of a more complex view, there is no such thing. It's not possible. It's only through a limited 3D view of something bigger to believe it, to be able to think it. But there is no such thing possible as wrong information. There is the limited perception, that is the incomplete perception, is what all these examples are about. Of somebody saying, on the 17th of each and every month, a little, I guess you people call it a little UFO, flies down in my kitchen and gives me secret messages. It's not that that's wrong, but that's not all the information the person's telling you. That's not all the information that is flowing through life's body. Every time somebody tells you something, I guess sure that's enough extreme examples from God talks to me, flying saucers visit me, this is the words of God, 2 and 2 is 5. How about everyday conversations? If somebody's saying that is not the way you should treat your fellow man. I heard the way you treated my brother-in-law in that deal, and I'm going to tell you what, that's not right. From some view, somebody thought that was right. The guy that did it thought it was right. It was good for him. All the kinds of discussions that make up history is a continual pointing, it's supposed to be, that, wait, this is wrong. This information is wrong. Your intent is wrong. What you swore to do is wrong. What you said, what we saw you do, and now what you say your intention was, no. That's not true. In other words, you're lying. The information you're telling me is wrong. But what they miss is, if from their view, few people on tape at the 3D level, this doesn't matter. It's the way it's supposed to be. But if they had some additional intelligence outside the 3D limits, they could say, you lied to me in the 3D sense, but what you're also telling me is something about you. That's what I always miss. For somebody to say, well, there's no doubt as to how we should treat our fellow man, and they say it. And let us say that you, for whatever reason, you're wired up a different way. You might blame it on your culture, religion, or whatever. And you think, that's wrong. It's not wrong information. What you are taking is an incomplete perception of it, because at the very least, the way you can start looking at it, is the subcarrier, the sub-level of information is always this. This is my opinion. This is what I am made to say at this moment. And yet it can be somebody that if you are operating at the same level, they can set your fields on fire, as the Baptists used to say, intellectually. That is, somebody says, hey, blah, 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 whatever they're talking about, and they go, I'm going to tell you what, dot, 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 dot. And that's that. You understand? And you think, how could you be such an idiot? You could not be more incorrect if you tried. You missed it. They didn't just tell you that, hey, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum. The part that they didn't say, the sub-level is, that's what I'm made to say. Well, now maybe we're getting somewhere. But nobody, of course, can say that. But now try and picture. Picture the world's great thinkers, rabbis, priests, your parents, people you like, people you don't like. That somebody, and but think, I'm trying to cover everybody. People with credentials, people that you're wired up to be impressed by. Somebody supposedly knows what they're talking about. Whatever, and somebody says, listen, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. And yet, you hear it, and you suddenly think, no, that's wrong. Not what I expected, that's wrong. But see, you didn't hear the whole message. Because there's no such thing possible as a wrong message, as wrong information. You just didn't hear it all. Because the person went, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-dum. It's what I'm forced to say. Now, you got to admit, that changes the complexion of the ball game. If indeed sporting events have a certain hue, you have a whole new reception yourself of information, of what energy is. I'm not going to make up any more examples. That's why I said history. But all 3D information, you've heard variations of this, but here it comes under the expanded auspices of what I had said tonight, that all 3D information vis-a-vis a more complex dimension, 5-dimensional place, that all 3D information per se, per force, vis-a-vis the greater dimension, is flawed. That is, incomplete. I usually say flawed, but you see now it's incomplete. It's not flawed that the people in the 3D, at the 3D level, who are forced to be outlets for whatever the energy is, that apparently is going to be words and information. It's not that they're flawed. The information is simply incomplete. It's 3D information, but there's always this sub-level of information going on. It is a revolutionist job to call doing this a revolutionist again. It is a revolutionist job, joy, and hobby to continually be adding on to the sum of this incomplete knowledge for himself or herself. That's what this is. From one view, from one description. Something else. Let's see if we can connect from a few nights back. You recall I pointed out that there are no such things as products without use. There's no soap without bathers. There are no shoes without people with feet. There are no thoughts without thinkers. But literally in the 3D world, you cannot sell products. You cannot sell goods. You're selling use. All the way from the crudest advertising to what would seem to be the world of the spirit, the world of the mind. That there are no goods without use. There are no products. If you begin to get a glimpse of this, then you've got to consider this. If you have some new information that you may have acquired and you do not use it, you've got to consider the possibility that it's going to become non-existent. It will become a non-product. Because there are no such things as products without use. That if people did not bathe, if you don't see this immediately, trust me. If people did not bathe, soap would disappear. Soap, in a sense, doesn't exist. The need for soap exists. To get old, your forefathers' idea of a extrinsic guide. It's not that God exists, it's the need, the use of it. But it is the same thing. You've got the same kind of three-dimensional, physical, biological, mathematical, zoological, anthropological demands on human thought. Thought doesn't exist. Thinkers, the use of it. But even as it appears that you do get new information, if it's not used, I don't know whether any of you heard the little tricky way I put it or whether you even smelled anything funny. Notice I didn't try to tell you that, well, you lose it. It withers and goes away. That's almost what the mind wants to hear, ordinary intelligence. There is, I hate to tell you again, but there is no ready way to describe this. If you got some real new information that you've acquired somewhere and you don't use it, it tends to become non-existent. It tends to become a non-product. Not actually disappear. Not that you actually lose it. Not that you get taught a lesson like, by God, we let you have some secret information. Did you use it? No. Therefore, we're going to make you a loser or forget about it or misplace it. It's not really that. Like without bathers, there wouldn't be any soap very shortly. Without thinkers, there'd be no thought. And even in areas where it is not, we're not referring to ordinary run-of-the-mill thought and information, there is still no clear-cut exemption. Also from a few nights back, you recall the night that I talked about men, intellectual in the ordinary sense, educated, sophisticated men, forcefully, though erroneously, in a more complex sense, speaking about those digital recorders, computers, being more than they are or more than they will ever be. The one thing I did not point out real specifically, I did it around the edges, but of men now being driven, continue to talk about that just around the corner, any day now, it's just all but a fait accompli, that these digital recording devices will be more than they are. That is, more than we are who designed, built, run, program, pay for them, shine them, clean them, dust them, that they will become more than the information. They'll become more than the energy. They'll be more than whatever was possible at one level. They'll become more than that. That their output will become greater than their input, and they can talk about it as forcibly as they want to. They can have as many degrees behind their name as they want to, but it won't happen. Not the way things are now. The one real specific that I didn't point out is this. How much does that sound like man's continual and historical reference to his own personality? Just cut out all the fat. How much does that sound like man being driven to talk about himself, at least in the Western world that you should know about, for around 5,000 or 6,000 years? Just unplug the term computer, PC, mainframe, any reference to a recording device. Is that not man talking about himself? Always talking about, many times forcefully. Yet I said erroneously, not that there's wrong information, but him talking about, well, I'm such and such. All right, turn to this machine, the computer. All right, give it incomplete information, insufficient information, and then ask it to come up with the correct answer. Or ask the computer to get up and go down the hall and bring you a cup of coffee. Ask it to get up on top of the building and jump off and fly with the pigeons. And yet you can say, I guess I carried a little far, didn't I? But there would people be now that say, wait a minute, I can describe you theoretically, and we're getting close to putting it into actual practice of how we're going to make this computer blah, 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 and whatever it comes out, what they're saying is, make its output exceed its input. And at the 3D description, you can listen, and you cannot say, well, that's wrong information. They say, no, we cannot necessarily right this second solder all the right places, build all the right chips, and make it work, but we know how. That close. 5,000 years ago, men were saying, I know how to be intelligent. Well, I know how the rest of the world should be intelligent. They just won't listen to me. But here's what should be done. It was either thinkers, it was shamans, people stand up and say, all right, the reason we're all upset, the reason that we're all dying, the reason that some of us get lines around our faces and that we get impotent and get old, I know why. If you people listen to me, and it comes out, it's just a variation now. It's whatever they're talking about in the AI labs at MIT. It's the same thing they've been talking about. They are demanding, and even saying they're expecting, that it's possible that a particular kind of machinery, it's just that this thing is in a box and they call it a something. It's actually a process, remember, because there are no goods. There's no such thing as a computer without its use. I guess the people in the business would say there's no such thing. I don't know who ever said this, but you'd have to say there is really no such thing operationally as the hardware without the software. Because if there's no software, period, what would it be? I mean, you could use it for a flower, for a planter, use it to stack dishes on. There is no such thing as the human personality, the human mind, unless it's in operation. And when it's in operation, it can expect more, it can talk more about what it is, when, in fact, at the 3D level, what it's saying is erroneous. Not wrong information, remember, incomplete information. Because what it's saying is, all right, here's the way humans should be. Did I lose too many of you? For 5,000 years, all right, everybody knows this, all the way from Greek philosophers, Oriental philosophers, the original religions, to your mama and your daddy. everybody points out that humans are not exactly up to par. Now, we all knew that before you got here. Before you ever started involved with this, all you got to do is from the deepest recesses of space. You don't need to hear the word of God such as, hello, this is Allah. All humans got to hear is way off in the distance. If they had radio telescopes strong enough that they could hear, they'd know, hey, that's God, because they understand that's God's opinion of us. They understand that is the way the universe feels toward us. I know that. Well, how do you know that? Because that's the way I feel toward me. Plus, that's the way I feel toward you. Now, I bet that's the way you feel toward me, isn't it? Yeah? Well, there you are. And they keep listening for these radio signals, and what they're trying to hear is... All right. So everybody knows that things are not exactly right. But does anybody go around now and beat up on computers and shoot them, throw them out windows? No, no, no. They simply say tomorrow, well, maybe the next week, blah, 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 blah. That is, they'll be able to do that which they can't do. They'll be as smart as we are, and then they'll be smarter. In other words, they can do the impossible. That is, it's erroneous information. No, not wrong, incomplete. That does not sound like 5,000 years of history of man talking about himself. He's just now shifted it instead of so much talk about himself. I've taken this and laid it over here. That doesn't mean that that's the end of men talking about themselves, or it's the end of men changing and having some alterations in the nervous system and in the thinking mechanism. But it is just an example that is a new of the incompleteness of one level, that is the three-dimensional level, let's say taken from a five-dimensional universe, and that the three-dimensional level can dream. Now, in a real sense, dreams are not something spiritual or intellectual. It's a form of energy. It's a form of differentiated, unexecuted energy, in a sense. But at the 3D level, it is as though people can dream of that which is possible at the 4 or 5D level, at least the 4D level. They can dream of it. That is, it's kind of energy that will stimulate the nervous system, the brain. And so if they can, quote, dream of it, they can talk about it. And if they can talk about it, then it sounds as though, all right, what we're talking about, got two possibilities, right? That what we're talking about, my imagination, what I dreamed of, is either possible, that is true, or it's wrong. That's my imagination, or I'm deluded. No. If somebody thought about it, it's not wrong. There's no such thing as wrong information. For somebody to say someday computers will be able to put out more than they take in, that's not wrong. It's incomplete. It's not going to happen, but you guys know the difference. There's a reason that people say that. See, you've already forgotten. It's only been 50 minutes and some of you had it a while ago. Somebody says, forcefully, with a background, credentials, a fanfare, maybe even a Victim On album under his arm, and he says, forget all this stuff you hear, the debate about artificial intelligence. I'm here to tell you, I'm the world's leading expert, bar none. I'm going to tell you what. Within 2 years, let me give you that. Within 2 years, we will have a machine that will be on par with me, with anybody can program it. It will be on a par with that. All right. That's not correct. But it's not wrong information. The leading information is wrong. Except, notice this, at their level now, the leading information of them, probably by and large, is now accepted as being, of course, not proven, but the weight is most likely correct. In other words, for me to say that's wrong, I would probably be outvoted by just generally intellectual, sophisticated people nowadays. And they say, well, no, too many people say that that's possible. I'm not an expert in the field, but you, that is me, you're probably wrong. Because if that many people continue, and they've been saying it now, it's been going on a good 5 or 6 years, and the den of it is even increasing, so you're probably wrong, and they're probably correct. The information is not wrong, because when they say that this is going to happen, which is not going to happen, remember? When they say it's going to happen, that information is incomplete. And I can describe it in all sorts of ways. The subcarrier of the information is we, me, and humanity in general, are continually led to believe in wild ducks. We're continuing to believe that the sentence starts anew just around the corner, down the street here, we're continually driven to say and to think that we'll be able to do that which we can't do, and that we should. And since we can't do it, it keeps us going. Such again are the general demands of being alive on this planet, which will make you, if you begin to have any sort of revolutionist sentiments, which I don't have time to go into, even if I could, but tends to cause one not to want to do stuff that's annoying. And things that are annoying are things that have no chance of completion. I don't mean fooling around with computers. I mean continuing to think stuff that's not worthy of thinking. That the subcarrier of the information of all this stuff you keep thinking is not, well, I'm not sure I'm thinking the right thing, or sometimes I think I'm thinking right and then again I think I don't, or sometimes I think I'm feeling correct. The subcarrier is, all of this is a waste of time. All of this is simply general requirements. If it wasn't for being on cable, all of this is cosmic BS. As far as I'm concerned, individually. And you got to know it, you can't adopt it because I said it. It's not just some form of smart-ass cynicism, essay cynicism. The general demands are that you play continually within that part of life's nervous system, and of course as reflected in your own, wherein there is either right or wrong information. Not just that 2 and 2 is either 4 or 5 or 3, but the kind of right information as to how you should live, what I should do. Well, there's just all kinds of crap that I got to put up with. I mean, it's just the way life is. You're right, unless you know better. Well, there's just things you have to do that sometimes I feel like I have to do it, and of course it's always in regards to other people, family, friends, somebody. And it's stuff I have to do that sometimes I just know in my little heart of hearts that I'm wasting my time. And yet you just got to do it, right, unless you know better. Then, forget about all this out there in family and friends, because here's your family and friends. I mean, you got fatter in-laws with bad breath and that stay too long than will ever bother you. Right here. Well, there are things I have to do. There are things I have to think about, things I have to not only think about, of course, there are things I have to think about and then think about and then think about. And think about 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 ad infinitum, if not nauseam. Everybody else does. And if you're everybody else, you got to. There is a place where it merges. It is a new building site, and you can take that which seems to be either, in the small instances, things you like, which is no importance to ordinary people, ordinary thought, but all the things that irritate you, all the things that bother you, all the things that people have misconstrued, all the ways in which people do not live a moral and upright, a decent and intelligent life, and all the way they mistreat each other, and especially you, and I'll put all that in here, and then realize the answer to that, if there was a three-dimensional answer, is the attempt to answer it. The aim is in knowing how to execute it. There is no difference. Well, I got to think about it. Right, okay. I understand that, yeah. Take your time. Most of you got 30 or 40 years left. Take your time. The merger. There is no wrong information. There is no right information. It is not that you must do what everybody else must do unless you're everybody else. Unless the intent stays separate from what might be the aim. What might be what it is that you really want. Not that you know. But it would be a kind of freedom, is why for a long time I keep calling it a revolution, a secret, non-lethal, non-violent, non-noticeable, and of course, almost non-existent. Internal revolution. If you look all right, more or less, you pass for sane. When everybody else whines and cries about their family and friends and the sorry state of the world, you know, if you got nothing else to do, if you're trapped in an elevator with them or you're trying to get a job, you can nod right along and say, shoo. But personally, I have no comment at this time. But I'm sure you agree with me, don't you? Well, if I did, my answer, I'm sure, would be possibly. Yeah. Here is the ultimate merger between taping and not taping. Are you ready?